The irrigation pipe burst again, spraying water across the field in a wide arc that caught the afternoon sunlight. Lily Reed laughed as the mist touched her face, cool and refreshing after 3 hours of helping her father repair the farming equipment. She was 10 years old and small for her age, with dirt under her fingernails and a smile that never seemed to fade. Her father, David Reed, grunted as he tightened the connector. He had been a Marine once, before the family moved to Harvest 7. Now he grew wheat and vegetables alongside 200 other human families who had chosen this quiet frontier world as their home. The work was hard but honest, and the planet was beautiful in ways Earth had never been. Across the field, 4 armed figures moved between the crops with practiced ease. The Quilven had arrived 5 years ago, refugees from a war they never spoke about. They were gentle creatures, herbivores who stood nearly 7 feet tall, but walked with a softness that made them seem smaller. Their skin was pale green, and they communicated in musical tones that humans found pleasant to hear. Petal, a young Quilven about Lily's age, waved 2 of her arms as she approached. She carried a basket of vegetables her family had harvested that morning. The Quilven and human communities had grown close over the years, sharing meals and celebrations, working together to make the colony thrive. Lily ran toward her friend, boots splashing through the damp soil. They met near the property line and sat together on a flat rock, eating sweet tubers and talking about nothing important. Petal's family had invited the Reeds for dinner tomorrow. They would cook the way Quilven preferred, with lots of herbs and no meat, and the humans would bring fresh bread. The sky darkened suddenly, as if a cloud had passed over the sun. But there were no clouds. Lily looked up and felt her stomach drop. Ships, massive and angular, descended through the atmosphere with engines that roared like thunder. They were nothing like the friendly trading vessels that visited once a month. These ships looked hungry. David dropped his tools and ran toward his daughter. Other humans emerged from their homes and workshops, shading their eyes against the glare of descending spacecraft. The Quilvens stopped their work too, their musical voices rising in confusion and fear. The ships landed in the open fields between the human and Quilven settlements. Ramps lowered with hydraulic hisses, and armored figures marched out. They were Draxians, a species known across 3 sectors as slavers and raiders. They stood 8 feet tall, reptilian with scales that gleamed like polished metal. Their weapons were already drawn. Colony Administrator Harris stepped forward, hands raised in a peaceful gesture. He was an older man, patient and kind, who had negotiated with dozens of species over his career. He spoke calmly, offering supplies, water, whatever the Draxians needed to leave peacefully. The Draxian leader, a scarred warrior named Greth, ignored him. His troops moved past the humans as if they were furniture, heading directly toward the Quilven settlement. Orders were barked in harsh voices. The Quilven tried to run, but Draxian soldiers were faster. They grabbed the gentle aliens roughly, binding their 4 arms with energy cuffs that burned the skin. Lily saw Petal's family being dragged toward the ships. She didn't hesitate. She just ran, screaming her friend's name. David shouted after her, but she was already too far ahead, racing across the field toward the Draxian soldiers. The massive hand closed around her arm, jerking her off her feet. The Draxian soldier lifted her by one limb, shaking her like a rag doll. His claws dug into her skin, and she screamed, a high-pitched sound of pain and terror that cut through the afternoon air. He tossed her aside carelessly, and she landed hard in the dirt, clutching her bruised arm. David reached her in seconds, scooping her up and carrying her away from the raiders. But something had changed in his face. The warmth was gone, replaced by an expression Lily had never seen before. Empty, cold, focused. All around them, other humans were changing too. Mothers ushered children into reinforced bunkers beneath the settlement. Men and women moved to storage buildings and returned with weapons that had been hidden since the colony's founding. Nobody spoke. Nobody shouted orders. They simply moved with purpose, taking positions around the settlement's perimeter. The colony's automated distress beacon activated, triggered by biometric sensors that detected a child in severe distress. The signal burst outward faster than light, carrying data across human-occupied space. Child harmed. Colony under attack. Coordinates attached. Greth barely noticed the humans organizing. His troops had already loaded 70 Quilven onto the transport ships. The harvest was good. These refugees would sell well in the outer markets. He ordered his soldiers to secure the perimeter and prepare for departure. The humans watched silently from their positions, weapons held ready, but not firing. That it made Greth uneasy. That silence. Prey species usually begged or attacked immediately. These humans did neither. They simply waited, tracking every Draxian movement with eyes that held no expression at all. Lily sat in her family's shelter, her arm bandaged by her mother. She didn't understand why everyone looked so sad. The bad aliens would leave soon, wouldn't they? Her father knelt beside her, touching her face gently. 3 systems away, a human trading post received the distress signal. The station master read the biometric data and went completely still. Then he pressed the priority alert button, broadcasting the information to every human vessel within range. Child harmed. Physical contact. Bruising detected. Harvest 7 coordinates attached. The response was immediate. Cargo ships dumped their loads and changed course. Military patrol vessels abandoned their routes. Even pirates stopped mid-raid and turned their ships toward the colony world. Across human space, a simple truth activated in millions of minds. A child had been hurt. Nothing else mattered until that was answered. The signal traveled through subspace relays, bouncing from station to station, spreading like ripples in a pond. Within 6 hours, every human settlement, ship, and outpost within 20 light years had received the alert. Within 12 hours, the message reached the core worlds. Within 24 hours, humans across an entire sector knew that someone had harmed a child on Harvest 7. Tommy-chun received the alert while hauling mining equipment through the outer rim. He was a freight captain, 32 years old, with a crew of 5 and a ship held together mostly by hope and welding. He read the message twice, then changed course without consulting anyone. His crew didn't question it. They had all seen the biometric data. Rachel Okonkwo commanded a destroyer in the human defense fleet. She was patrolling the border when the alert came through. Her orders from command were clear. Maintain position, do not abandon patrol route. She read those orders, then read the alert about Lily Reed's bruised arm. She changed course toward Harvest 7. 14 other military vessels in her task force followed without being asked. Even the criminals heard. Marcus Webb ran a smuggling operation that kept him 3 steps ahead of the law. He was delivering weapons to a buyer when the alert reached his ship's computer. He read it, cursed quietly, then turned to his buyer and said the deal was off. The buyer protested until Marcus showed him the message. Then the buyer, who was human too, nodded and offered to join the trip to Harvest 7. They left the weapons behind and went together on Harvest 7. 2 days passed slowly. The Draxian soldiers finished loading captured Quilven onto their transport ships. They laughed and joked among themselves, celebrating an easy raid. Greth watched the humans from his command ship, studying their strange behavior through exterior cameras. The human colonists hadn't attacked. They hadn't fled. They simply watched from their defensive positions, weapons ready but not firing. Children remained in shelters. Adults took shifts maintaining the perimeter. Nobody spoke much. They just waited with a patience that felt wrong. David Reed sat beside his daughter's bed in the medical center. Lily's arm was healing well. The bruises were already fading. But every time he looked at those marks, something cold settled in his chest. Other parents visited, checking on their children, making sure everyone was safe. They touched their kids gently, then returned to their posts with that same empty expression. Petal's father, a Quilven elder named Moss, managed to approach the human settlement under a white flag. The Draxians allowed it, amused by the aliens' courage. Moss found David and tried to apologize, his musical voice cracking with emotion. His people had brought this danger to the colony. He was sorry. David looked at the tall alien, this gentle creature whose only crime had been seeking refuge. He placed a hand on Moss's shoulder and said simply, "This isn't your fault. Wait with us. Help is coming. Moss didn't understand. Help from where? The nearest human military base was weeks away. But he saw something in David's eyes, in the eyes of all the humans. They weren't afraid. They were just waiting down on the third day. The first ships arrived. Not one or two, but dozens dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect coordination. Freighters, mining vessels, private yachts, small patrol boats. They took positions in orbit, forming a loose perimeter around the planet. More ships arrived every hour, filling the space above Harvest 7 with human vessels of every size and type. Greth watched the fleet assemble with growing concern. He contacted his superiors, requesting reinforcements. His own fleet consisted of 30 warships, well-armed and experienced. The human vessels gathering above were mostly civilian, barely armed. But there were so many of them. His second-in-command suggested they finish loading prisoners and leave immediately. Greth considered it, but his pride wouldn't allow retreat for merchant ships and miners. He broadcast a warning to the human fleet. Any attack would result in the execution of all Quilvan prisoners. Leave now or be responsible for their deaths. The human ships didn't respond. They simply maintained their positions, adding more vessels to their formation with each passing hour. 12 hours after the first arrivals, over 200 ships surrounded the planet in a perfect sphere. 24 hours later, that number had grown to 300. Greth tried again to contact them. He threatened. He offered to negotiate. He explained that his fleet was superior in firepower. The humans remained silent, their ships holding position like patient predators on the planet. Lily felt better. Her arm barely hurt anymore. She wanted to go outside and play, but her mother said to wait a little longer. Through the shelter's small window, she could see stars that weren't stars. Ships, hundreds of them, filling the sky like fireflies. Rachel Okonkwo sat in her destroyer's command chair, watching the tactical display. Ships from across the sector had converged on this location. There was no unified command structure, no battle plan that she knew of. But every captain understood their role. They waited. Tommy Chin's freighter drifted near a luxury yacht that belonged to a corporate executive. Next to them, a prison transport floated alongside a colony ship. Rich and poor, military and civilian, law-abiding and criminal. All human, all here for the same reason. After 48 hours of silence, a single transmission burst from the human fleet. It was text only, sent on every frequency in every known language. 6 words: return the child's friend. Leave. Live. Greth read the message and laughed. They were offering him an escape? After he had taken Quilvan prisoners and struck a human child? These aliens understood nothing about power. He ordered 3 Quilvan prisoners brought to an airlock. He had them executed while broadcasting the footage to every human ship. The transmission ended. Silence filled the communication channels. Then, slowly, like flowers opening to sunlight, weapons systems across 300 human ships powered up in perfect synchronization. No commands were given. No orders exchanged. Every captain simply knew it was time. The battle began without warning or ceremony. Human ships moved as one organism, converging on the Draxian fleet from every angle. They didn't target the warships first. Instead, they focused on the transport vessels holding Quilvan prisoners, their weapons firing with surgical precision. Tommy Chin's freighter, armed with nothing but mining lasers, cut through the hull of a transport ship with steady determination. His crew worked in silence, using equipment designed to crack asteroids to breach reinforced metal. When they opened a hole large enough, boarding teams from nearby ships poured through. The Draxian guards inside the transport never expected miners and merchants to fight like soldiers. But these humans moved with purpose that transcended training. They swept through corridors, neutralizing resistance with efficient brutality. Guards who surrendered were zip-tied and left behind. Guards who fought were put down quickly. Greth watched his fleet respond to the attack. His warships had better shields, heavier weapons, superior armor. They began targeting human vessels methodically. A mining ship exploded in a ball of fire. A freighter's engines died, leaving it drifting. A patrol boat was cut in half by concentrated plasma fire. 12 human ships were destroyed in the first hour. Greth felt satisfaction watching them burn. But then he noticed something wrong. The human fleet didn't slow down, didn't retreat. For every ship destroyed, two more pressed forward. They flew damaged vessels into combat until life support failed, then evacuated crews to other ships and kept fighting. Rachel Okonkwo's destroyer traded fire with a Draxian cruiser 3 times its size. Her shields were failing, hull breaches reported on multiple decks. She should have pulled back, regrouped. Instead, she ordered all power diverted to weapons and drove straight toward the enemy vessel. Her crew obeyed without hesitation. The destroyer's remaining missiles struck the cruiser's bridge, and both ships shuddered from the impacts. Rachel's vessel was dying, atmosphere venting from a dozen holes. She gave the evacuation order. Her crew made it to escape pods, launching into space where other human ships picked them up within minutes. Rachel stayed at her post until the last person was clear, then ejected as her ship's reactor went critical. The explosion damaged the Draxian cruiser badly enough that it limped away from combat, no longer a threat. Rachel floated in her pod, watching human vessels swarm around the remaining enemy ships. Tommy Chen's freighter pulled alongside her pod, and rough hands dragged her to safety. Inside the Draxian transports, human boarding teams reached the prisoner holds. Quilvan families huddled together in fear, not understanding what was happening. Human Marines moved among them carefully, cutting restraints, checking injuries. A medic knelt beside a terrified Quilvan child and offered water with gentle hands. They evacuated the prisoners through makeshift bridges between ships, passing them from vessel to vessel until they reached safety. Quilvan who could barely stand were carried. Injured ones received immediate medical attention. Children were wrapped in blankets and given food. The Quilvan elders couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. These humans fought with vicious efficiency against the Draxians, then turned and showed infinite gentleness to the rescued prisoners. How could the same beings contain both qualities? Moss found himself on a human medical ship, his family safe beside him. Through a viewport, he watched the battle continue. Human vessels surrounded each Draxian transport, extracting prisoners while holding off the warships. It was organized chaos, violent and precise. 6 hours into the battle, every Quilvan prisoner had been recovered. The human fleet should have retreated then, their objective complete. Instead, they formed up and began systematically dismantling the Draxian warships. No longer defending. Now hunting. Greth's superior shields and weapons didn't matter when facing 300 ships coordinated by shared purpose rather than command structure. Every time his gunners targeted one human vessel, 5 others attacked from different angles. When he tried to organize a formation, human ships broke it apart by sacrificing themselves to create openings for others. His second-in-command begged him to retreat. Greth finally agreed, ordering the fleet to form up for a jump to faster-than-light speed. They needed to consolidate, call for massive reinforcements, return with overwhelming force. But when a navigation officer tried to engage the jump drive, nothing happened. Proximity alerts screamed warnings. Human ships equipped with experimental jump disruptors had surrounded the Draxian fleet, creating a field that prevented faster-than-light travel. They were trapped. Tommy Chun piloted his battered freighter alongside Marcus Webb's smuggling vessel. Both ships were held together by emergency patches. Both crews were exhausted. Neither showed any sign of stopping. Marcus opened a communication channel. "Your ship looks terrible." Tommy laughed, a sound without humor. "Yours is missing an engine. Still flying, though." "Yeah, still flying." They moved together toward another Draxian warship, firing their remaining weapons until both vessels ran dry. Then they rammed their ships into the enemy's shields, creating brief openings for other human vessels to exploit. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Humans fought past exhaustion, past damage, past reason. They didn't charge mindlessly. Every action had purpose, but they didn't stop for anything, not even self-preservation. A luxury yacht belonging to a corporate executive, its elegant hull scarred by weapons fire, positioned itself between a Draxian destroyer and a colony ship full of rescued Quilven. The executive, a woman who had never fired a weapon in her life, stood on her bridge and waited for impact. The destroyer's main guns charged. Before they could fire, 20 human vessels swarmed the destroyer from every direction. Missiles, lasers, kinetic weapons, even mining equipment struck in unison. The destroyer's shields collapsed, and its hull began to break apart. Greth watched his fleet dying around him. 15 of his 30 warships were destroyed or disabled. The rest were damaged and surrounded. His crew looked to him for orders, but he had none to give. How could you fight an enemy that didn't care about losses? That didn't retreat when hurt? That just kept coming with mechanical inevitability? He opened the communication channel to the human fleet, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice was steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. "We surrender. Unconditional surrender. We will submit to your justice. Please stop." The human ships ceased fire immediately. The sudden silence felt louder than the battle had been. Boarding teams moved through the surrendered Draxian vessels with systematic efficiency. Human Marines secured weapons, restrained crew members, and cataloged evidence. Everything was documented. Every injured Draxian received medical treatment. Every surrendered soldier was treated according to rules that humans had written centuries ago about prisoners and warfare. Greth stood on his command deck, hands bound, watching humans work through his ship. They were polite but cold, following procedures with mechanical precision. A Marine captain approached him and explained that he would be transported to the planet's surface for trial. Greth nodded, too tired to argue. The Draxian crews were separated. Officers from enlisted, those who had directly participated in striking Lily or handling prisoners roughly from those who had only followed orders. Witnesses were identified. Security footage from ship computers was preserved. The humans built their case like lawyers, not warriors that on the planet's surface. Harvest 7 small courthouse became a tribunal. The building could barely hold 50 people, but humans made it work. Chairs were brought from dining halls. A jury was assembled from colony residents who hadn't witnessed the events directly. A judge, a retired Human Defense Fleet admiral named Sarah Kamani, presided over the proceedings. The Quilven elders were invited to attend. Moss sat in the front row, his family beside him. He watched as Greth was brought in, still in his armor but stripped of weapons. The Draxian commander looked smaller somehow, diminished by defeat. Sarah Kamani read the charges in a voice that carried through the packed room. Kidnapping, assault of a minor, attempted slavery, destruction of property, murder of prisoners during surrender negotiations. The list continued for 5 minutes. Evidence was presented with clinical detachment. Security footage from Draxian ships showed soldiers grabbing Quilven roughly, showed the execution of prisoners as a bargaining tactic, showed the moment a Draxian warrior lifted Lily by her arm and tossed her aside. The recording played on screens set up throughout the courthouse. Lily sat with her parents, watching herself on the screen. She barely remembered that moment. It had happened so fast. But seeing it now, seeing how carelessly the soldier had hurt her, she understood why everyone had looked so sad. The Draxian soldiers were given opportunities to speak. Some claimed they were following orders. Others said they hadn't known humans would react this way. One young soldier, barely adult by Draxian standards, broke down crying and apologized directly to Lily. She waved at him, confused about why he was so upset. Sarah Kamani listened to everything. She took notes. She asked clarifying questions. The trial lasted 3 days, with breaks for rest and meals. Humans brought food for the Draxian prisoners, good food, nothing spoiled or insufficient. They provided medical care for injuries sustained in battle. They treated the prisoners better than those prisoners had treated the Quilven. Finally, Sarah announced the verdicts. 18 Draxian soldiers, including the one who had grabbed Lily, were found guilty of assault on a minor. Greth was found guilty of ordering actions that resulted in harm to a child, among other charges. The remaining crew members were found guilty of lesser crimes related to kidnapping and violence. The sentences came next. The 18 soldiers directly responsible for harming Lily would serve life imprisonment on a human penal colony world called Redemption. It was a harsh place, cold and isolated, but prisoners there were never abused. They worked, they ate, they lived. They just didn't get to leave. Greth received the same sentence. Life at Redemption, no possibility of parole. The lesser criminals would serve shorter terms, between 5 and 20 years, depending on their actions. One of Greth's officers, a veteran warrior who had fought in a dozen campaigns, stood and shouted at Sarah. Why hadn't they just executed everyone? Why this pretense of justice? The humans had clearly wanted them all dead. Sarah looked at the Draxian officer with an expression that held no anger, only certainty. We don't kill prisoners. We don't abuse the defeated. Those are human rules, and we follow them even when we're angry. You'll live a long life on Redemption, remembering every day what happens when you touch our children. The officer sat down slowly, that answer more frightening than any death sentence could have been. Before the Draxians were transported off-world, Greth asked to speak with David Reed. The request was granted under supervision. They met in a small room with guards at the door. Greth, still in restraints, looked at the human farmer who had once been a Marine. I don't understand your species, Greth said quietly. We hurt one child. One. In a galaxy where billions suffer every day. Why did you come? Why did hundreds of ships abandon their missions for a single girl? David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Because she's ours. Because every human child is everyone's responsibility. Because if we don't protect them, what are we worth? But the cost, Greth protested. You lost ships, lost lives, all for one child who wasn't even seriously injured. The cost of not coming would have been higher, David replied. Every human who received that alert knew they had a choice. Stay where they were, or answer the call. They answered. That's who we are. Greth shook his head. Your species will never conquer the galaxy with that mentality. You care too much. David smiled, an expression without warmth. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We just want to live in it safely. And now, because of what happened here, other species will think twice before harming human children. So maybe this was exactly what we needed. The Draxians were loaded onto transport ships the next morning. Human crews would deliver them to Redemption, a 3-week journey. The surviving members of Greth's fleet who hadn't directly participated in crimes were allowed to leave, their ships barely functional but capable of limping home as the last transport departed. Tommy Chun stood beside Rachel Okonkwo near the landing pad. Both had been offered medals by the Human Defense Fleet. Both had declined, saying they were just doing what anyone would do. Think this will change anything? Tommy asked. Rachel watched the transport vanish into the sky. Yes, I think every pirate and raider in this sector just learned a valuable lesson. What lesson? That humans are soft and kind and gentle. Right up until you touch our kids. Then we're something else entirely. The Unified Galactic Council convened in emergency session 2 weeks after the incident at Harvest 7. The council chamber was a massive dome floating above the planet Unity, where representatives from 400 species gathered to maintain peace and order. Today, the chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Ambassador Catherine Wright represented humanity. She was 60 years old, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat in the human delegation section, listening as species after species voiced their concerns about what they were calling the Harvest 7 incident. A Talarian diplomat, his blue skin flushed with agitation, spoke first. The human response was completely disproportionate. 300 ships for one injured child. This sets a dangerous precedent for intervention. A Morthian representative, her translucent form shimmering in the chamber's light, agreed. The level of violence deployed was excessive. The Draxians had surrendered, yet humans continued to hold them accountable beyond any reasonable measure. More voices joined the criticism. Humans were too emotional, too reactive, too willing to abandon their responsibilities to chase personal vendettas. The galactic community couldn't function if every species responded to minor injuries with fleet-level military action. Catherine listened to it all without expression. She had expected this reaction. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage, only 3 generations since first contact. Other species still didn't understand them, still tried to fit human behavior into familiar patterns that didn't quite match. When the floor was finally offered to the human delegation, Catherine stood slowly. The chamber quieted. Everyone wanted to hear how humans would justify their actions. "I've listened to your concerns," Catherine began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "And I understand them. From your perspectives, our response seems extreme. One child with minor injuries, and we mobilized hundreds of vessels. We abandoned trade routes, military patrols, and personal business to converge on a remote colony world. It must seem irrational." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Catherine continued, "Let me explain something about human psychology that you may not understand. We are a social species. We evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Predators, disease, natural disasters. Earth was not kind to humanity. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's geography, its dangerous wildlife, its volatile weather patterns. We survived because we protected each other, because we understood that every member of the group mattered, especially our children. A human child represents our future, our hope, our species' continuation. Every human, regardless of whether they've met that child or share genetics with them, understands this instinctively." A Corellian delegate interrupted. "Many species value their young. That's not unique to humans." "True," Catherine acknowledged. "But here's what might be unique. When a human child is harmed, every human everywhere feels personally responsible, not metaphorically. Actually, the distress signal from Harvest 7 didn't just carry data. It triggered a biological and cultural response in every human who received it. We call it the protective instinct, and it transcends logic, personal safety, and even self-interest." She changed the holographic display to show the gathered fleet at Harvest 7. Those 300 ships represented miners, merchants, soldiers, criminals, rich and poor, young and old. They had nothing in common except their species. But when they saw that a child had been hurt, they all made the same choice. Not because they were ordered, because they couldn't do otherwise and still call themselves human. The Talarian diplomat spoke again, his tone slightly softer. "But the violence, the persistence, you could have stopped after rescuing the prisoners." Catherine met his eyes across the chamber. "Could we?" The Draxians executed prisoners during surrender negotiations. They tried to use murdered civilians as leverage. If we had stopped at rescue, what message would that send? That humans can be manipulated through violence against innocents? That harming our children carries no lasting consequence? She paused, letting that sink in. We didn't continue fighting from revenge. We continued because the galaxy needed to understand something clearly. Humans are peaceful. We trade fairly. We make good neighbors and better allies. We will negotiate, compromise, and forgive a vast array of transgressions. But there is one absolute line, one rule that cannot be broken without consequence. And that rule is, ask the Morthian representative. "Don't touch our children," Catherine said simply. "Don't harm them, don't threaten them, don't put them in danger. Because if you do, every human within range will come for you. Not with anger, not with chaos, but with the kind of organized, relentless response you saw at Harvest 7. We will retrieve our children, we will neutralize the threat, and we will ensure you face justice. Always." The chamber was silent. Catherine continued, "This isn't aggression. It's information. We're telling the galaxy clearly what will happen if this line is crossed. No more surprises. No more misunderstandings. Now everyone knows." A representative from a species Catherine didn't recognize stood up. "What if someone harms a human child accidentally? What if it's a cultural misunderstanding or an accident?" "Context matters," Catherine replied. "Accidents happen. We understand that. But the Draxian who grabbed Lily at Harvest 7 wasn't confused or clumsy. He was careless with her safety because she didn't matter to him. That carelessness ended his freedom. Had he apologized immediately, had he shown genuine remorse and care, the response might have been different. But he tossed her aside like garbage. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. Let me be clear about something else. This protection extends beyond just human children. Humans form attachments easily. We bond with other species. Those Quilvan refugees at Harvest 7, many humans consider them friends, neighbors, family. When the Draxians tried to take them, humans responded not just because a human child was hurt, but because people we care about were threatened. So humans will defend other species? A delegate asked. When we care about them, yes, Catherine confirmed. We're not policemen for the galaxy. We won't intervene in every conflict or protect every victim. But harm someone under human protection, harm someone humans have claimed as friend or family, and you'll discover that our protective instinct doesn't recognize species boundaries. A long silence followed her words. Finally, the council chairman, an ancient being whose species had maintained peace for thousands of years, spoke. Ambassador Wright, your explanation is noted. The council will consider this cultural information when evaluating future human actions. Catherine nodded. That's all we ask. Understanding, not approval. 3 months after the trial, Harvest 7 looked almost normal again. The crops grew tall in the fields. The Quilvan worked alongside human farmers, their musical voices mixing with human laughter. Children played together without fear, Lily and Petal among them, already forgetting the terrible days when ships had darkened the sky. But things had changed in subtle ways. Every galactic news feed had carried the story. Every diplomatic channel had discussed the human response. Every criminal network had updated their operational parameters. The galaxy had received its message, and the galaxy was listening in a bar on the edge of civilized space. A young Draxian named Kelth sat with his crew, celebrating a successful raid. They had hit a mining colony and taken valuable equipment without casualties. The hall would keep them fed for months. Kelth ordered drinks for everyone, feeling proud of his first command. An older Draxian sat alone in the corner, nursing a drink and watching the young raiders celebrate. His name was Roth, and he had served under Greth before Harvest 7. He had been part of the lesser crew, sentenced to 5 years on redemption. He had been released early for good behavior, but those years had changed him. Kelth noticed the Scar veteran and invited him to join the celebration. Roth accepted, moving to their table with slow, deliberate steps. The young raiders asked him about his experiences, hungry for stories from an older warrior. Instead of battle glory, Roth told them about redemption, about the cold that never left your bones, about working beside humans who treated you fairly but never let you forget why you were there, about the long nights remembering everything that had led to imprisonment. But you survived, Kelth said, trying to inject optimism. You're free now. Back to the life. Roth shook his head slowly. I survived, but I'm not the same. None of us who went there came back unchanged. He looked at each young face around the table. You want advice from a veteran? Here it is. Pick your targets carefully. Avoid human colonies entirely. And if you ever see a human child during a raid, you turn around and leave. Immediately, Kelth laughed. Because of one incident, they got lucky at Harvest 7. Lucky! Roth's voice went cold. 300 ships appeared in 3 days. 300. From miners, merchants, criminals, soldiers. They came from everywhere, and they fought like machines. That wasn't luck. That was a species showing the galaxy exactly what they're capable of when you cross the line they care about most. He pulled up a datapad and showed them footage from the battle. Ships sacrificing themselves to rescue prisoners. Marines fighting with coordination that shouldn't have been possible without Central Command. The methodical dismantling of Greth's fleet. We had better ships, Roth continued. Better weapons. More experience. And we lost because they didn't care about any of that. They just kept coming until we were broken. He looked at Kelth directly. The galaxy thinks humans are soft because they're peaceful. They're not soft. They're choosing peace. But they'll choose violence just as easily if you give them the right reason. And that reason is their children, one of the younger raiders said quietly. Their children, Roth confirmed, and anyone they consider under their protection. The Quilvan at Harvest 7 were refugees. Humans barely knew them, But they had lived beside them for 5 years, shared meals, become neighbors. That was enough. Humans bonded with them. And once humans bond with you, they'll burn the galaxy to keep you safe. Keltha's celebration had lost its energy. The young raiders looked at each other, processing this information. Finally, Keltha asked, "So what do we do?" "Avoid all human space." "I'm saying be smart," Roth replied. "Ride cargo ships, fine. Hit mining operations, okay. But civilian colonies? Anywhere there might be families? Steer clear. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you've hurt a human child, even accidentally, surrender immediately and hope they're in a forgiving mood. Because the alternative is every human in range coming for you, and they won't stop until you're judged." The message had spread far beyond that one bar on that one night. Across criminal networks, mercenary companies, and raider fleets, the story of Harvest 7 became legend, become a cautionary tale. Operational guidelines were rewritten. Target selection became more careful. On Harvest 7 itself, life continued. David Reed taught his daughter how to repair irrigation systems, passing on skills that would help her maintain the farm someday. Lily worked beside him, chattering about school and friends, completely unaware that her name was now known across multiple sectors. Petal's family had expanded their vegetable gardens, and the Quilvan community thrived. They had voted to name their largest communal space Friendship Hall in honor of the humans who had come to their rescue. Moss gave speeches there sometimes, reminding his people that humanity had shown them what true strength looked like, the kind that protected the weak rather than exploiting them. Ambassador Catherine Wright completed her tour of core worlds, explaining human psychology to dozens of species. Most listened politely. Some understood. A few became genuine friends, recognizing that humanity's fierce protectiveness came from the same place as their capacity for kindness. On Unity, a new entry appeared in the Galactic Species database under Humanity Behavioral Notes. It read simply, "Highly social species with extreme protective instinct toward juveniles. Do not harm human children under any circumstances." This is not advice. This is survival information. The Unified Galactic Council formally recognized that humans would respond to threats against their young with overwhelming force. It wasn't approved or condemned, just acknowledged as fact, the way you might acknowledge that fire was hot or space was cold. Tommy Chun returned to his freight routes, his ship repaired and space-worthy again. He carried cargo between systems, made decent profit, lived a quiet life. But the emergency beacon on his ship remained active, always listening for priority alerts, always ready to drop everything and respond if the call came again. Rachel Okonkwo took command of a new destroyer, her crew composed of survivors from Harvest 7. They patrolled the borders and kept trade routes safe. Once a year, they visited Harvest 7, bringing gifts for the colony and checking on Lily, making sure she was safe, making sure she was happy. And Lily grew, surrounded by humans and Quilvan who loved her, never knowing that her name had been whispered across the galaxy as the child who reminded everyone what happened when you touched humanity's young. She was just a girl on a farming colony, living a peaceful life under skies that no longer darkened with threatening ships, because the galaxy had learned its lesson and the galaxy remembered.